Esther Richardson, Director. What drew you to the story of Mary Wollstonecraft?
So what drew me to wanting to tell the story of Mary Wollstonecraft was I was very lucky that I studied Mary Wollstonecraft at university. That's when I first heard about her. Part of my course was gender history and narrative. I did English literature, which was a really wonderful degree to do. And you have to study Mary Wollstonecraft if you do gender history and narrative, because Mary was such an important, brave figure in history, one of the very first women to risk saying the stuff that people don't want to hear, and asking the questions that people don't want to ask about the role of women in society. And the fundamental question she wanted to ask was, why can't women be treated equally? Why can't they have the same freedom that men have, and the same autonomy over their lives, if you like? And her life and work was really an exploration of this question. And she did, as I say, take huge risks in her life. She was often mocked for her work, and even at university in the 90s, which is, I know, it seems like a long time ago now, but actually isn't that long ago. Sometimes her work was introduced as, she wasn't such a great writer, but you kind of need to know about her. Anyway, I always found her to be hugely inspiring. She really touched my life as a young woman as well, because if you get to know her life story, as you do in this play, you understand the reality of the challenge of being a woman. So it's all very well wanting to put yourself out there and wanting to be an intellectual and a philosopher, as she did want to be. But if you're a woman, you're sort of besieged with the challenges of, in that time, there was no contraception or anything like that. So if you had any kind of loving heterosexual relationship, the question was, were you going to get pregnant? And if you got pregnant, then, your life would be about raising children. And there was such a sort of narrow definition and a narrow set of thinking about what was possible for girls and women. So she had a challenging time, because she did have two girls, and we see that in the play. But even before that, the expectation for her was that she'd do a lot of the care work at home and the domestic tasks, and she'd sort of be responsible for looking after her sisters, and she was responsible for looking after her mum as well. And her mum tragically dies in the play, but it fell to her to look after her during the end of her life, and do her end of life care. So there she was, dealing with all of this stuff. She couldn't have autonomy. What was open to her in terms of a career was maybe a bit of teaching. So to even pursue the dream of being a writer at that time was just so radical. It was such a brave thing to do. And of course, she had to write under a pseudonym at first, because, nobody could entertain the idea of a woman writing books and writing pamphlets as she did. So she really, really broke the mould. And it was not an easy thing to do. It was a difficult thing to do. And in a sense, I like to think that this play is an honouring of her, what she did for all of us who are here today, and in a sense, a kind of reflection on the struggle that still continues, actually, because it's not a perfect world, and we still don't have equality and gender equity. Even in the wealthiest countries in the world, we still face all sorts of battles for women's rights.
What were your initial ideas for how the play would work on stage?
I was very lucky that I'd worked with Maureen once before on a project called Northern Girls, which is how we met. And Maureen had the idea. It was all her idea. She came to me and she said, I've had this idea to do a play and a production about Mary Wollstonecraft. And she'd also started a conversation with Hull Truck Theatre, who are co-producing the play with us. And she thought there was some interest there as well. I thought it was an absolutely wonderful idea. Since studying about Mary Wollstonecraft all those years ago, she'd always been, in a sense, in my imagination, and I'd often thought, oh, is there a play about Mary Wollstonecraft? Because that would be so exciting. And I was aware of things like Hamilton, which is set kind of at the same time, interestingly, and I know it's set in America, and it's also a story about a real push for progress as well, isn't it? I thought how interesting that's been such a success, and wouldn't it be great if there was a play about Mary Wollstonecraft, but never really figured out the best way to do it. Because a lot of what Mary had to deal with is really sad. It really tugs at your heartstrings. So where's the kind of counterpoint to that? But knowing Maureen, Maureen is such a dynamic, brilliant writer, and she's very witty. And I thought, if anybody could write a really interesting story that takes Mary Wollstonecraft and her work as the starting point, I reckon it's Maureen. And Maureen also had this pitch, which really I thought was super exciting, which was to do with the fact that Mary Wollstonecraft, a little known fact about her is that she grew up in the north of England, which is where Pilate's based and it's where Holtrook's based. And I thought that's a really kind of compelling thing that I hadn't really taken hold of myself, even though I'd read lots of books about her. So that was the beginning. We started off by writing, or rather Maureen wrote, what's called a treatment, which is an outline in a sense of the narrative of the play. So we commissioned that first. I wouldn't always do that, but it felt like a good way in to start to think about how would we do this? Because actually writing plays that are based on people's lives is more challenging than you might think. It's almost harder than adaptation, and it's harder than writing a new play as well. Because what episodes are you going to include? You're talking about somebody's life here. Although she tragically died when she was 38, what a life. I mean, it's extraordinary, some of the things that she did and some of the things that she accomplished. So making a bit of a map, if you like, of what would then become a script did seem a sensible starting point. Then Maureen went very quickly from writing a treatment into a script writing process, and had such a great set of instincts about the episodes to include. So I think from quite early on, I mean, we don't include everything, and we have had to take decisions about cutting things that we would love to be in, but we also know what the attention span is of an audience. So you have to be quite clear about what you want to include. So the script was a process where she started to figure that out much more clearly. And from the very first, she had this vision that there was music in the play and singing, and in a sense, maybe that the storytelling or the storytellers were almost like a band, something like that, was I think in the script from the very, very start. And there were 1,000 characters in it, of course, as well, which is very typical for a pilot production. So immediately I thought, well, we can make this as an ensemble piece. And then I think the process really over the last couple of years, because we've been working on it for quite a long time, has been about, well, how many actors should be in it? Who are they? Apart from Mary Wollstonecraft herself, who else do we want to bring to the fore? And we've been working together on that, and also with a company of actors and other creatives on that question. But the piece is in a sense, it's a very sort of typical pilot show with about 6 actors on stage, with this really amazing dynamic music in it, and sense of theatricality and storytelling and physical theatre. All of those elements, as you'd expect from us, are there.
How is Mary's life depicted in this staging?
She's depicted from the moment that we meet her. She's very sadly on her deathbed, but but it's a kind of extraordinary deathbed because it's also the bed in which she gives birth to another incredible writer, Mary Shelley, who is the woman who wrote Frankenstein and was also just an incredibly important woman in British history and British literary history, and her contribution as well was enormous. She kind of invented Gothic, really, as we know it, in some senses. So we have a group of women who gather around this bed as Mary Wollstonecraft has, in a sense, a fever dream. And the fever dream, if you like, is a reflection on what's my life meant, what's it amounted to, and what am I leaving here, knowing that I've just given birth to a tiny, fragile little girl. So it's such a kind of moving place from which to sort of start to explore some of the questions that the play looks at. So the first song in the play is called "How Do You Grow a Girl?" How should we raise girls and young women is the first question that's asked, and in a sense, it's one of the most important questions in the whole of the play that we're also wanting to put into the audience and into the conversations that everyone in the audience will have after the play, and that we hope will happen in classrooms as well, in terms of, how should girls be able to fulfill their dreams and be the best versions of themselves that they can be, and have this freedom to pursue great adventures in their dreams and ambitions in this current sort of male-dominated society that we actually all live in. So the Hyenas gather. One of them is Mary Shelley. And in a sense, they're there to help Mary Wollstonecraft reenact these episodes from her life. So the production does have an episodic quality, and we do move through the major incidents of Mary Wollstonecraft's life, and the moments where she might have learned something, or something shifted for her, or a challenge pushed her to go forward and write something extraordinary that we still have today. So that's essentially the structure, and it does have a cyclical feeling to it as well. So we end in a sense where we begin, and the play itself is a countdown over the 10 days that she has left with her baby daughter, if you like, from the moment that she gives birth to the moment that sadly she passes. And that's the framework.
What themes and issues does the play explore?
The first theme, I think, is this theme of gender equity and gender equality and feminism. That's a theme that goes through the whole play. And as I've said, many of the songs in the play ask these important questions. So there's a huge amount to get your teeth into there. And also, you're watching a drama play out that, in a sense, is set in the 18th century, at the end of the 18th century, which is on the global stage, a time of revolution and change. But actually, as I said earlier, some of the questions that she's facing and asking are still pertinent today for girls and women, whatever background that they happen to be from and wherever they are in the world. So I think that's really the core of the themes, or the themes spring off from that. Related to that, I think a really beautiful theme in the play is motherhood and mothering, and what it means to care for children, and what it means to care actually for a range of people, and how we're going to do that in society, and how we're going to do that in a way that's equitable, and what does it mean to give birth, and how is that related to writing and art as well. So art making and writing and creativity, I would say, is also a really super important theme in the play. How that gives us power and how we can express ourselves through those mediums, and what they can do for women and what they can do to make change happen in the world as well, is another rich theme that runs through the play.
What rehearsal techniques do you use as a director in the rehearsal process?
The process for me always starts with the text and with the script. So in a sense, even before we get into rehearsals, we've been in a process. We might not have alighted on who exactly is going to be in the production, but Maureen and I, with others, with Sarah the designer, and with Tor the composer, and with Emily the musical director, we've been working for some time on figuring out, in a sense, what the architecture of the production might be, and on the story, and on the character development. So when we get into the room, that's really exciting to have done that, and then the actors start to get more deeply involved in it. So techniques I'll use sometimes are things like actioning and work on the script, where we look at different sections and we draw out the themes, and we also think about what are the characters doing. So in a sense, acting is exactly that. It's like, how are the characters acting in this moment, and what are they doing to other characters? How are they behaving? You can start to embrace those questions on a much deeper level when you have actors, because that's what they're interested in. They want to know what makes this character tick. Why are they bumping up against other characters in this particular way all the time? And they start to make those observations about, in a sense, the character's behaviour, our human behaviour. So there'll be all sorts of great conversations about psychology, what we think is motivating the characters, and some close work on the script. Alongside that, so we would call that table work, really. And table work is important and it's powerful, and it gives everyone a chance to sort of really look at what's in the material that Maureen has written. But running concurrently with that, I do like to get people into their bodies, because what makes us tick is not just up here. We're also physical beings with a body, and in terms of characterization, how are we going to embody those characters? Literally, how do they walk around a room? Just a simple question. How do they enter through a door? How shy are they? What are they like when they're in a public space? How do they fan their voice? What might their physicality be like in terms of how they might hold themselves? What's their spine like? Are they very sort of closed off? Are they very, very open? Exploring those quite simple things can be a great access point for actors to start to physicalize this person and bring them to life. So I would say it's the psychological work, and the work on thinking about what's going on inside the character, but also thinking about how that manifests in the body. Both of those things are happening at the same time in the room, and the days are broken up with some physical work, some work around the table, and of course singing. So on this show, there'll be a lot of singing, and a lot of kind of really getting into the abdomen and finding our voices and breathing and really giving ourselves that stretch, so that when we embrace those songs as the characters, we sing with our whole heart and our whole body, and it sounds wonderful.
What do you want the audience to take away from this production?
I think what's really exciting about this production is you come along and you see 6 female performers on stage, which is really exciting, and you see them kind of do an impossible feat of playing all these different characters, bringing them to life, moving, dancing, acting their socks off. So I suppose I want the production to be really inspiring, and for Maureen's words and ideas that kind of fuse with Mary Wollstonecraft's words and ideas, to leave you with the powerful questions around, how do we make the world fairer, better, more equal, more exciting, full of greater possibilities, so that we as human beings can fulfill our potential. I think that's what the play is aiming towards.